Art Nouveau is, of course, a movement that covers all the arts, from architecture, furniture, but also letterforms, and that's the area that we're going to be looking at. It's not easy to know what to call it. Art Nouveau, the French term, was widely used in English. There really isn't an English version of it. Modern style in French is English, and to be fair, it was sometimes called simply l'art moderne. But there you have it, a paradox in both directions. But it's also sometimes known as the style 1900, the style of 1900, because of course it coincided with the great international exhibition of that year. Liberty needs a word or two about it. It's nothing to do with the Statue of Liberty, but the shop in Regent Street, which specialized in printed fabrics, which made use of the new style. And then Jugendstil is quite simple. It is the style promoted by the art magazine Jugend, which, as I note here, means youth. So it's very much a style of the new century. I'm showing here an image by Walter Crane, which is a bit of a paradox because he called it, in so many words, that strange decorative disease. And yet, in a way, he produces in this image of the peacock one of what you could call the icons of the movement. It figured in the fabrics sold by Liberty in Regent Street. And of course, Crane's poetry, reproduced from his own writing, is an echo of another of the founders of the inspirations of Art Nouveau, and that, of course, is the work of William Blake, making his own images and often reproducing his own writing. It's very much a non-historical style, which was perhaps one of the reasons why it seemed appropriate for the new century. This is an image often reproduced as, if we can use the word, an icon of Art Nouveau. This title page for a book on Rennes city churches, which gives you no image of a Baroque building, but instead this flowing plant-like form, which is typical of the new movement. And a certain flow is obvious in the woodcuts of the so-called Beggarstaff brothers, who draw on the almost formless types of ballads and other crude printing of the 17th century to make their woodcuts, not wood engravings, but very much woodcuts. And the same inspiration is there in the work of the engraver Crawhall, who is again deliberately giving you a shapeless letter, something that must have been attractive to Morris himself when he came to do his golden type. In France, the new style was made to fit the new century, with the completion, or at least the upgrading of the new underground railways, the Métropolitain, and there was a need to identify where you went in, with these entrances, and many of them were made by this the artist Hector Guimard, making use of the plant-like form and making the lettering in a way conform to the swirling shapes of the plants that he used as a motif. The movement was sympathetic to the idea of the artist taking back responsibility for his own images. The autographic movement in lithography and etching too, not letting your drawings be reproduced by artificial photographic means, but drawing on the stone. And of course in the posters of Toulouse-Lautrec, the lettering certainly takes very much second place to the ostrich feather on the hat of the music hall artist. And there she is, Jane Avril, with again lettering which in a way is made to conform to the artist's style as he draws on the stone. Here's one of these images being printed on a hand-operated press, and you can see the stone on the press itself. And there is Jane Avril with her ostrich feathers having a look at a proof. Again, lettering made secondary to the image in the work of Bonnard, again drawn on the stone. I suppose one exception to this passion for autographic images is the artist Mouchat, whose work was drawn and then redrawn by commercial printers who handled it extremely well. Again, the lettering is very much made secondary to the image. Salon des Saints even has to be repeated because you can't read it at the top of the image. And there on the right, the brand of tobacco for smoking called Job. Again, the lettering is made secondary to the image with its complex, obsessive concern with strands of hair crossing each other. In purely typographical terms, this is worth noting, this title page of 1890, in which the artist, Whistler, whose essays are printed here, takes a hand in actually placing the type on the title page in an asymmetrical form. That's a theme that would recur several times. I talked about autographic work, but a great exception to that is the work of Aubrey Beardsley, which was almost entirely pen-drawn. And this, you could say, was a kind of parody of the dense pages of the Kelmscott Press, drawn on paper and reproduced by so-called process engraving of the kind that Emery Walker did, drawn, photographed, and etched. So the same features are seen in this Beardsley drawing, in which he exploits the dense blackness, but also the stipple at the bottom of the image, which no wood engraver would have had the patience to reproduce dot for dot. But here you have the asymmetric title page of the yellow book, an English medium for the new art. And the asymmetry is reproduced under that influence, no doubt, for this poem by Oscar Wilde, who was indeed prisoner number C33 in Reading Jail. I couldn't resist putting this example in, which amazingly does survive, at Blackfriars, of this Art Nouveau pub with its copper lettering showing you which way to go for the saloon bar. And there is your Art Nouveau lettering used for the pub called the Black Friar, in fact, in this mosaic form. Here's a piece of Art Nouveau imitation of an Italian name of a press of the 15th century, but in this case V.P., with a carnation sticking out of the P, is, I suppose, a reminder that the veil press never really existed. It was the imaginary press of Charles Ricketts, who's using the idea of the private press for printing work that he especially cherished. In France, we have someone who left his mark on typography, but was also a specialist in book covers too. The Petit Larousse Illustré, one of the classic pieces of bookmaking of the 20th century, is drawn and signed indeed by Eugène Grasset, who left his name on this printing type, the Grasset, for the foundry of Georges Peignot. And here we have a kind of assertion of the identity of what is indeed now here called l'art moderne, and not modern style. L'art moderne affirms itself in all the branches of decoration, where it is expressed with a kind of flourishing of these vegetable forms. And so printing, which reflects all the arts, has to be its mirror. Well, there's Art Nouveau typography. And there's another example of the character, the type called Grasset. Peignot had another artist whose work they used, Georges Auriol. There on the left you have his hand-drawn announcement of the birth of his son, and on the right similar techniques used for the logo, I suppose is the word for it, of the foundry, Georges Peignot, clearly very much echoing a Japanese or Chinese artist's sign, these broken up lines. These would come into the printing type that Peignot made and gave his name, Auréole, a kind of stencil form for the ornament. It's echoed, in a sense, in Germany. Otto Eckmann was an orthographic designer in his own right in Berlin, and his work was adopted by the Klingspor type foundry near Frankfurt am Main. So the Eckmann type is the kind of German expression of this flowing form of letter that you see with Grasset. But this is proclaimed by a German printing magazine to be German work that we are justified in being proud of. Berlin, the capital city of the German Empire. Flowing forms, which were echoed in some of the related designs sold by the foundry, and explained at great length by the artist himself in his introduction to the Ekman type. The flowing forms are there in these two-colour initials produced by the Klingspor foundry, which to my mind echo a well-known image of the period. Here are some of the German magazines. Pan. There's Jugend, which gave its name to the style. Let's conclude with a type which did leave its mark on typography in the most unexpected way. Schelter and Giesecke were one of the big type foundries in Leipzig, in many ways the great printing centre of Germany. And so here we have a type that was commissioned by them and took the name of the Schelter family, Schelter Roman. A very distinctive design with much of the flowing quality of Art Nouveau. It was stolen. American type founders, always keen to pick up a stylistic trend, produced it in not an ideal year for a new type, 1914, calling it Souvenir. Was it just possibly reminiscent of another type? Well, put it next to the Schelter Antiqua, and there's really no doubt. The form of the R, the S without a final sort of swelling, and so on. Even that letter A with its convex strokes on the outside all belong to Art Nouveau. Why do I say it left its mark later? Well, it did. It was curiously in the 1970s, when there was a sudden kind of passion for revived Art Nouveau, the souvenir type itself was redrawn by Ed Bengat and leaves us with souvenir as much a type of the 1970s as the 1900s. Venice, Vienna of the movement seceding from formal academies, is another great home of Art Nouveau. Here is the building of Olbrich for the secessionist movement, with forms of lettering which typically are hidden by the relief part of the imagery of the building, and a name which was that of an Austrian art magazine. Legibility, as you see, hardly comes into the picture here. Here's one of the posters for the artistic movement its advertising. And the same concern is reflected in book by Otto von Larisch on legibility in ornamental letters, an echo of Italian work of the 15th century, but made into a kind of all-over pattern, which you could say is typical of Art Nouveau. Here is the type that Ricketts made for the press that didn't exist, but he made sure that he drew a type that could be reproduced and used for his commercial printing.